Hello, Toronto and GTA viewers. I'm Richika Bindra and you're watching #NoFilter. Stay tuned as we are talking about everything Canadian and media. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of #NoFilter. I'm Richika Bindra. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tweet us throughout the show. We have a really exciting lineup today. I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists. We have Nikta, Cora, and Sophia. Hello, guys.
Hi.
And I'm extremely excited. It's a huge honor for me, especially because she's someone I've looked up to. We have Veronica Chale, Canada's very own. She's a journalism professor. She's currently at Ryerson, York, and Seneca. So we're going to talk a little bit about women in media, advocacy journalism, and really understand the Canadian media landscape from all angles. So welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to finally sit down. I think there's a lot you can bring to our millennial viewers and just in general to viewers within the Canadian media landscape because so much is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I never thought I would ever be part of a show with #NoFilter because that never left our lips when I first started.
So now you're going to be no filtered in your entire conversation. Amazing. So a lot of people don't know this. I used to live in Montreal, and back then I wanted to go into journalism and television. And I said, well, I'm South Asian. I don't really see a lot of South Asian faces in the Quebec media landscape. And I turned on the TV. It was a Sunday afternoon, I'll never forget, and Bollywood Boulevard was on. And you were on, and I was like, I'm pretty sure she's brown. I'm pretty sure she's South Asian. And I did some, some stalking and some Wikipedia researching, and you were. And I said, okay, next up, Toronto, So it's nice to finally see the change, especially from province to province as well.
Well, thank you so much for watching and supporting back in the day.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you enter Canadian media? How did you enter sort of the on-camera and behind-camera landscape?
Yeah, it was an incredible journey, and I sometimes don't realize the process that I went through. So in university, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I was the president of the Pre-Law Society. I was very active. Very active. I was a choreographer for different dance clubs and so forth and cultural groups. And I was on a mission to be this entertainment lawyer. And so I had applied for law school and then, didn't hear back. So I was like, well, what if I don't become a lawyer? What if I don't get into law school? So then I applied for my master's in journalism. And I got in right away. And I loved the program at the University of Western Ontario. And it definitely kicked my butt in the sense of really grounded me and taught me a lot about, radio, television, and print, and the different ethics and legalities behind journalism, the aspect of truth-telling, and all like the nitty-gritty stuff that you need to know to become a good journalist. And then right out of university, finishing journalism school, I was actually in journalism school. I thought I wanted to take the summer off to go travel or just, watch paint dry because I was so tired of studying. And I got hired as a news reporter. And my first day on the job, I didn't know what I was doing. I had interned for Omni Television, the South Asian edition, because I really wanted to know what it was like to report and get into the heart of different communities. From a religious standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, just the right terminology and so forth. So I get on to my first day of, this big report that I have to do, and it had to do with an anti-terrorism legislation.
Oh my God.
And I had to process this information super quickly, and I literally had a couple of hours, but in school we had a few weeks. And so I thought I wanted to run out the door, vomit in my mouth. I was petrified. I was absolutely mortified that I'd even signed up to be in this industry. Somehow I got through it by, literally harassing everyone on the floor. And I delivered the top news story of the day. And then I got into a lot of the hard news stories, and I did so many different types of stories. And then eventually moved in from news into news producing and news writing. And then I went over to the CBC with George Stroumboulopoulos and was one of his producers. And as you know, he's one of the best conversationalists and interviewers out there. And then I went back to Rogers and worked with City TV and Omni Television, and I hosted my own show called Bollywood Boulevard for 5 seasons, and it was a national show. And it's been fun, a lot of fun, and a lot of challenges, and a lot of curveballs and so forth. And for the most part, I've constantly been a sponge, I think, and just constantly, just learning and just absorbing it.
I think it's interesting to see that your career has sort of shown you so many different facets of Canadian media that most people in this profession kind of, streamline into one place. Either, I'm into news, or I'm into production, or I'm into lifestyle reporting, or, I'm on air. You've kind of been able to take a little bit of everything, which is rare, so that's commendable.
Thank you. I didn't plan it that way. I was supposed to just be behind the scenes, behind the camera, and just wear sweatpants and jeans and never put makeup on, but instead I always found a place on camera, which was always super fun. My favorite part was just interviewing. I just got to meet some of the best people, so many fascinating people, the movers and shakers of the world, and just everyday people where they had really good, strong stories that, just never have left me. But yeah, I dabbled in, or actually I got my hands wet in news, hard news, reporting, and obviously there's a difference between information reporting and journalism. And I had to learn that as well, because I thought it was all together and it was all mushed together, and it's not like that at all. But yeah, I got into news, and then I did producing, so factual entertainment, and then entertainment with Hollywood and Bollywood. So it was a lot of fun.
That's amazing. Who has been someone you've really interviewed that has stayed with you?
Well, from the Bollywood end, Shah Rukh Khan, he was incredibly charismatic, Bollywood's biggest superstar, where I thought I was going to die from being run over by his fans, because I was hosting one of his events and he was singing, and I got to interview him a few different times and host multiple events, and it was incredible. From so many different interviews, I would say, everyone from Michael Douglas to even someone like a former Canadian sniper who was based in Afghanistan. His name was Jody Middick, and just kind of getting through his mind and understanding what it was like to be a sniper in a combat zone, and he ended up losing 2 of his legs as a result of it, but he wanted to go back into combat position. So just understanding different things about the human condition. I've interviewed parents who've lost their children. I've interviewed, even the case, the Omar Khader case, I should state. I was following his brothers, Abdurrahman, and he was in court at the time, and that was really eye-opening because of publication bans and so forth. And Omar Khader, at the time when he was at Guantanamo Bay, he was a child, in my opinion, and so that really opened my eyes about legislation and so forth. And he's been released since, but that case really touched me, and so many different stories have left such an impact. It's really opened my eyes, because we would often get a lot of the footage. We still, a lot of the outlets still do have access to the raw footage. A lot of the footage that can't be viewed by the public just because some of the scenes are so gruesome and the footage is so raw that we have to filter it.
That's the true journey that you get to see as a reporter, because you get to see everything. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the role of women in Canadian media and the change she has seen since her entry into the Canadian media landscape. Stay tuned, everybody. Thank you for watching, everybody. We are back on #NoFilter. Don't forget to tweet us live throughout the show. We will be later on taking on some tweets and questions that you do have for Veronica and our panelists. So, Veronica, before the break, we touched on some, I think, important aspects that are kind of a great lead-in for me to ask you. Women in media today.
Yes.
Women in media before. There's been some things that we're still struggling with, but there's also been, I think, a lot of developments. As somebody who's now been in the industry for a little bit of time, where do you sort of see the change, and what do you see as some of the issues that we're having?
Well, I think the good side, or the positive side of things is that there are more female faces on television. There are more female executives. I think when I first started, and I still think it's the same in this sense, unfortunately, is that we do work in a male domain. And I wish that there was more of an equal playing field, and there was more representation from the female domain. And so from an involvement perspective, it's certainly great because, women are creating their own content. We have YouTubers who have incredible influence, and they're empowering and they're funny. And even if you look at SNL, for example, of, you know, Melissa McCarthy being a great female comedian to Kristen Wiig and Amy Poehler, and just so many individuals who have never had a chance at being in front of the camera, Chelsea Handler. I just think of these great, incredible women who are so talented, who are comedians, but speak about such, you know, incredible politically charged issues that we don't always get a chance to talk about because opinions aren't necessarily always allowed in the sphere, though we try to kind of
dig it in,
nod
subtly,
to certain things.
Right?
But I do think that just the angles, you know, I think we're done with the days of being, I mean, it's funny because, you know, as a professor, it is a very sensitive time and you have to be politically correct, and people are incredibly sensitive, and accessibility to information is there because of social media and just different devices, and people sharing information is a lot quicker. So people catch people a lot quicker. So people are far more sensitive, I'm finding that anyways, and being politically correct. But on the flip side, people are more open and raw and authentic, and I think audiences are demanding authenticity, and they're demanding, you know, truth-telling and accuracy, even though we're in this other era of fake news. So there's all these different threads that are being pulled. But for women especially, I think we're becoming far more outspoken than we ever have been. I think we're trying to get into more powerful positions. In fact, we've always tried to. But I just, the frustrating part for me personally has always been, you know, females, there's not enough representation when it comes to females in certain areas of the media. The pay disparity, you know, women aren't getting paid as much as some of the guys. And to me, that's just, it's ridiculous. And I can't understand it because, you know, we're coming up with some of the best ideas are coming from women.
But I think it also goes down to a lot of, it goes down to typecasting, right? Like women are typecasted. Okay, you can do entertainment.
Yes.
You're stronger at lifestyle reporting.
Yeah.
Am I going to give you the breaking news? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Am I going to give you the 10 p.m. news? You know, not that story.
Yeah.
So I think it's, you know, every time I look at sort of the key things that are happening, the political, you know, the breaking news industry, it is still over 60% male dominated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you bring in that niche? You know, how do you sort of have women that can come on and look the way they do and still be able to sell you an idea and you believe it, right?
Yeah.
We almost have this notion that if you're a pretty face or if you're a female reporting a story, to me it's not as you know, as urgent. That urgency sense sort of is disappeared for some odd reason.
Yeah.
And I see that all the time, whether it's here, whether we look at European media, you know, media back in India, I think it's something that's, funny enough, it's all throughout.
Well, you'll hear comments even, I mean, I've always taken on the mentality of being a viewer, so even if I'm part of a viewing crowd or I'm just watching a game, you know, you'll hear certain sentiments still of, oh, she's really pretty and she's really smart. Like, it's like, you know,
it's a big deal.
like, yeah, they're just surprised and you're just like, wow, this is incredible that, you know, that we're still saying those things. I mean, even just the idea of how we, I mean, with social media and so forth, the idea of we sexualize so many different girls at such young ages, and we still continue to do that, obviously, with different individuals who are part of the media, especially women and so forth. But it's a very interesting conversation because of the culture around media, and I think the attitude and the mentality towards female, just the term female, has to change in order for us to really evolve from an equality standpoint.
I think it should just be people that are telling stories, and they're telling stories as their job. You know, I always tell people, always ask, okay, what do you do? Because, you know, you work in media, you work in advertising, you work in journalism. I say, I tell stories through different ways, and it's almost important that we give people that sort of credibility and respect, because that's what they are doing, right? At the end, we're trying to communicate it to you, sometimes in a more serious light, in a lighthearted approach. And I think when we stop those gender kind of
biases,
it's going to help.
It will.
Do you find now that you're teaching media, people are a little bit different in terms of taking in text, because they're sort of like, oh, well, I get it online. Like, I don't, what you're telling me, is this true? Like, let me search it, you know?
So there's a few different rules in my class. I have more rules than God. Okay. I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. Sometimes. But the way I, you know, deal with my students and teach my students is I don't lecture. I treat all my classrooms like a newsroom. I get them to utilize my students who are incredibly talented and super smart. And I'm not being biased because I'm their professor, but I get them to get involved immediately and participate. Because in a newsroom, there are no handouts. No. There are no pamphlets. There are no guidebooks, except for how to use the very tricky technology that anyone, for the most part, can learn with a lot of practice. I get them to participate. So we start off with a newsroom setting. So we go through the different news verticals of news, entertainment, sports, technology, trending topics, business, health, and I want them to not just give me the headlines, because that's very easy, but to really break down what the story's about.
Nice.
If we were in a newsroom and what would take priority. I get them to do in-class assignments. I do not actually post any lecture notes because I believe in just that simple art of listening. Because even though a lot of people think journalism and media is an industry where you get paid to talk, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
You get paid to listen.
Yes.
for most of the mediums anyways. And so I really treat it like a newsroom because it is a pretty challenging landscape, the media landscape is, and you need to have thick skin, and you need to be able, and it was always a motto when I was in the business, and it still is to get over it, because things change as things move along, and you have to have really thick skin.
Yeah, with you saying like you have to have thick skin, and especially in the media, as a female, how did you, because a lot of times they say in the media you have to, go through changes, and people mold you, or how they want them, how they want you to look like or act like and be like. How did you stay authentic to who you are?
Hold that question. On the other side of the break,
question.
Exactly. We will talk to Veronica about that. Don't forget to tweet us at NoFilterRogers. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We will be posting some pictures after the show. So stay tuned and we will be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We are talking with Veronica Chail all about women, media, and advocacy journalism. So, Nikta, you had an amazing question. I will let you guys get into it.
Yeah, so just to remind everyone of my question. So how do you stay authentic to who you are with the whole media, wanting to shape and mold you however they want?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There are so many pressures and there's so many ideas of what you should be, and everyone has different labels and masks and so forth. For me, I didn't know how to be anyone but myself. I've always believed in the quote of be yourself because everyone else is taken. And I think that's what really shines in the end. I'm very opinionated. I've always seen myself as very credible and bold. And I always had different perspectives, but I was always very open-minded. So I was always learning. I've never acted like a know-it-all and so forth. But being authentic means simply knowing who you are, being true to yourself, knowing your worth. And as a female in the industry, it can be tricky because I've been in those boardrooms where you walk in, you have hair extensions in, the fake eyelashes, lots of makeup, and you're in a pretty little dress, which is great, and I think it's a lovely look, and you're in a boardroom full of men. And, here they are thinking, hey, she's just a talking puppet, she's a television host, because oftentimes that's the label I would get, and I would feel it. But because my father and my mom raised me the way they did, where, they always taught me that I could always be like one of the boys, play with the boys, and be just like the boys. Like, I never really knew the difference. Like, I really didn't know that, hey, there's a difference between, the genders other than, hey, that, certain aspects biologically. But in terms of what you could do and what you could achieve, my parents never said, well, just boys do that or girls do that. And I think one of the biggest things that we need to do for women, which my father did for me, was he always focused on my intelligence. We never talked about looks at home. I think that's what we often do, is focus on women from a very young age with little girls. It's like, oh, you're so cute, you're so pretty. When we should be saying, I personally feel like, hey, you're really smart, or where did you get that idea from? And talking to them and engaging with those types of conversations, and not being so segregated with the colors of pink and blue and so forth. I think you need to open up those conversations at a very young age, so girls aren't trying to achieve, where like the glamour factor is such a big deal for them. Like they're not trying to achieve just, you know, the look factor. They're trying to achieve, you know, the education aspects and so forth, where it's very empowering. I mean, taking care of yourself, looking good, that's a great thing. I think taking care of yourself from a physical standpoint is a beautiful thing. I love rocking, you know, dresses and having fun and wearing hair extensions. I do. But it's not who I am necessarily all the time. It's a part of me, though. And I think it's a lot of fun being a girl. So,
did you find that misconception was there when you were sort of with millennials and kind of beginning to teach them? That they come into class saying, okay, I'm in media and I'm in journalism and I need to have like my stilettos on and my hair, because, you know, there's this idea that you're in media and you're in TV and so you need to look a certain way. Did you kind of have to help debunk that?
I did.
Yeah.
I do. I still do. And you know what? I think a lot of people come in and the first thing I ask is, hey, what part of the media or journalism industry do you want to work in? And first thing is, I want to be a television host. I want to be on air. I want to be famous. And I was like, okay, so let's scratch that and restart. It's simply not because that's not something you can't do. I think a lot of people have been able to, jump right onto being an on-air host and so forth, which is fantastic. It's not as easy these days as it used to be.
Absolutely.
But then there's the online platforms and so forth. But I often say, I always, when I was in studio and I was hosting my shows, I would be the last person in makeup. I would be getting yelled at by my producers because I was writing script. And I was so concerned about what was coming out of my mouth and whether or not I'd be articulate or if I could pronounce certain things, that I'd be the last person in makeup. And so it was always like a rush. But I realized that was actually a good way about going through this industry, simply because I think too often we focus on what we look like. And I always say this to my students. I was like, well, if that was the case, then every single supermodel or anybody who you deem as beautiful would be on air. But the real art in journalism is listening and talking, and can you be articulate? Can you converse in a very simplistic manner for people to understand what you're saying? And can you storytell? So I think that was one of the big things for me is that I never, with my students, I'm just like, okay, let's not focus on the looks. Come in here however you want, and just be yourself.
I think that's important too, right? To find your voice in an industry like this, because everyone wants to ape a successful producer, everyone wants to ape a TV host, everyone wants to ape a model, and I firmly believe there's no right path.
Yeah.
Like people are always like, well, what's your path? I'm like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm finding it every day. I'm not going to buy a biography of a really famous person and follow their path, because their path isn't your path, right?
Yeah.
So that's something I think that's really important that we lose today as well.
Yes.
Veronica, something that I think is also sort of a little bit of, it touches a bit of advocacy as well, is that online right now, besides the fact that, it's hard to decipher real and fake news, and that's a whole topic in itself, but advocacy journalism is constantly questioned today. When there's information coming at you from everywhere, where do you start as just a young millennial, a 16-year-old girl heading out to school, someone like me and my, I like to consider myself young, but let's just say, in my lower 30s, not even hitting 30s, like where do you sort of start to say, okay, this is where I can get information, this is valid, there's some authenticity to the story? Because there's some really big and renowned names in the industry that are producing information and later they're not true. So it's not like you could say, okay, I'm going to tune into the 7 main media sources today or the 8, right? Because even their source sometimes, unfortunately, because they're trying to get it out so fast, we want to break news every second.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to get the facts.
And that's a great question. I think that goes in the realm of reporting.
Okay.
That's not, to me, that's not real deal journalism. Journalism is where you have done a lot of fact checking. Now, when a journalist makes a mistake and there's an error, as we all make mistakes, that's just a mistake. That's not fake news. And I think that oftentimes, if there is a mistake, people are now deeming it as fake news.
Yeah.
That's not the case. If it's a credible, accurate journalist who's been practicing for a while and it is with a very credible outlet and source, then, that was just a mistake, and they'll often, if not always, correct themselves, and they'll apologize if they need to. When it comes to fake news, it's those ideas where I see, how a mom and son were walking down an escalator and then got swept out by a kangaroo and then had dinner with a dinosaur. When you see something so, and I just made that up.
Okay, so cool. Did it happen?
And then you start to share. Exactly. You're like, wow, this is so cool, because now anything is possible these days, right? So with that respect, when something sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true.
So the 20-pound weight loss secret that's on breaking news is not.
It's not going to happen. Especially now, if you also see it in an advertisement form, or it says sponsored. That's not, often. I mean, it could be from a very credible source, but that's advertising. That's sales. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's not necessarily journalism either. Verified sources like the blue check mark is always good.
Perfect. Okay, on the other side of the break, we are going to take in some more tweets, and we are going to continue to chat about women in Canadian media. Stay tuned, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Ruchika Bindra, and you are watching #NoFilter. We are sitting down with Canada's very own Veronica Chael. I love that title that I've self-created. It's just working. You should include it in your PR kit. We've been getting quite a few tweets from all of our viewers, so let's take a look at one. It's going to come up on the screen right now for our viewers. And the question is for Veronica. Please ask Veronica what impact fake news is having on legitimate news agencies. All right, that's a really good question. Thank you. And continue to tweet us at NoFilterRogers. We will be taking some more throughout the show.
Oh, it's the impact is enormous.
I was going to say.
And it's frustrating me, like really and truly, because so many people, like I was teaching one of my classes, and one of my students was saying CNN is fake news. And I had to correct my student, and she had heard it from her brother. And I was like, that's not fake news per se, that's reporting. And sometimes there's a differentiation between journalism and reporting. Now, fake news is having a terrible impact due to a certain president who I won't name right now for the purposes of just being objective. No, I will. President Trump has often used the term fake news. This is no filter, so I will be open.
Please. We already had an episode on
So he keeps using it, and he's saying, Wall Street Journal to the New York Times to whoever at the time is fake news, quote unquote. And with that, there's a lot of propaganda. So if you constantly are following somebody that you really like and value, and he constantly says, he or she says, this is fake news, this is fake news, the audience and the viewers start to believe that it's fake news. And then you can't differentiate what is real and what is, accurate and so forth. So again, it comes down to, yes, read the headlines, and then do a little bit of digging, as opposed to, and I often hear this with my students when we do these newsroom groupings, is they'll just read me the headlines, and I'll say, what's the story? And they sometimes can't piece together the story because the story is all over the place. So you have to do a little bit of digging. So if you are going to reshare that story, make sure you know the facts. Make sure that if you are posting an opinion on social media for anyone who is interested in any single story, make sure you do the research, dig a little deeper, look at different sources. Even if they're stating that, X number of individuals have been injured, if it's 16, maybe say over 10 people, rather than specifically stating 16 people, because information's still coming in. So it's just that accuracy. The story's still developing. But yeah, it's got a monumental impact, because right now we have the whole thing of citizen journalists, and there's the social media world and memes, which I love.
I love memes.
And I communicate with a lot of my friends just through memes because they're hilarious. But sometimes people take that as actual news, and it's a little bit frustrating. It's actually not a little bit, it's a lot of it. That's even a word. Frustrating for someone like me who really tries to teach about, the ethics, the accuracy, truth-telling. What's your source? That's the first thing I say to my students. What's your source?
Is it almost impossible, Veronica, today then to say, just to kind of play devil's advocate, let advocacy and journalism and, authentic, non-objective reporting, is it almost possible today? Because, let's say, I were to work for a really big news place. Let's say I would work for CNN. I may not realize it, but, the people above and above and above of me may have their own right or left-wing, prospects. So as a journalist in the industry, I find, especially for American journalism, it's a little bit more challenging. Where do you feel like that pressure is there in Canadian journalism too? Oh,
of course. I mean, each outlet is, the way the media industry works is we're often funded by advertisements, right? And that funds the business. And I definitely think the business model of journalism definitely needs to change, because obviously there's a lot of changes and there's a lot of layoffs, unfortunately, that have been happening, and the face of journalism is changing rapidly. But the thing about objectivity with journalism, while the goal is objectivity and you want to remain neutral and you always have two sides to the story and the truth is paramount, and accuracy, of course, you got to think of it. You're a news outlet, and there's different people and different sponsors that are funding your outlet, and you have to
accommodate.
You have to accommodate, and oftentimes, as you will know, and as we've seen, CNN is, in my opinion, more left wing. Oftentimes,
Absolutely.
in terms, you look at Fox, it could be more right wing at times. It just depends on where a lot of the funding is coming from. It's not always the case, but I'll give you an example. Unfortunately, there was that mosque shooting in Quebec recently. And there's a man that's been charged, and he's going back to court on March 30th. And, you know, if you're a news outlet and you're first at the scene, are you going to talk about the victims? Are you going to talk about the shooter? Are you going to talk about the government? Are you going to talk about Quebec? Are you going to talk about religion? What angle are you starting your story at? And that changes the entire piece
The
of
entire
objectivity.
depiction, exactly.
Yeah. So it depends on where you're going to, and it all depends on your producer, you as a journalist. It's storytelling.
So if you're seeking information, how can then I decipher what is the reputable source, like depending on what angle you're going for?
So in terms of if you're seeking a particular source for a particular story, you're saying, so again, it's looking at different sources.
Okay.
And oftentimes you'll be able to match up that, hey, there was I'm going to go back to that shooting. There was a shooting, X number of individuals were killed. There's, an individual who's been charged and convicted again are two different things. Yeah. I know at the time that they had said that there was two people that were charged and so forth in relation, but it was a witness. Again, there was the whole idea of the terrorist label, but that was taken away afterwards once we found out the background of this individual, and people were upset about that. So it's reading different sources, not just having one source. Yeah. And then getting the information. Again, police reports are always really good. So if you go to the police websites, oftentimes when a government official releases a statement, that's always good from a government political standpoint, whether you agree or disagree. There's a lot of accuracy in it. And then just going to multiple sources. Vice, I think, is a great outlet. I love Vice. I'm a really, really big fan of Vice. And I think that anytime I see a journalist or a reporter embedded in any of their areas, I know that they are reporting the truth.
I think it's about just taking information from different places together, not sort of reading the first thing you see and then sharing it on Facebook, and then your friends sharing it, and then everyone's sharing it, and at the end the article is totally incorrect.
That's what's unfortunate, though, because so many people aren't educated that you need to educate yourself, literally going to all these different sources. People will believe the first thing and just go off on that. They don't realize that there are other sources, that there are different sides of the stories, different angles.
And the thing about that as well is that when people are regurgitating the information, or if you're just talking among your friends, be sure to correct them. You know, even if you don't want to say anything, just say, actually, I read, and sometimes you can. That's why in a newsroom you'll often find people butting heads and people disagreeing, and that's a great thing because someone may say, well, no, I like this angle, or no, I think we should start here. And so that kind of inverted pyramid of all the most important stuff is up at the top, and then you kind of decipher all the other stuff and put the other stuff at the bottom. But what is the important stuff? How do you decipher that?
Amazing. All right, everybody. On the other side of the break, we're going to take one more tweet, and we're going to continue our conversation with Veronica Chell. Stay tuned, everybody. Thank you so much for watching yet another episode of #NoFilter. We've been getting a whole bunch of tweets, so as promised, we will start this segment with a tweet. So it's going to come up on the screen for you guys to look at, and our question is, with every media outlet wanting to be first, is there enough time to fact check? Because if you're not first, you're done. Oh, that's a good one.
Wow.
So if you're not first in breaking news, you're almost, you missed the story. So it is claimed to be.
Yeah. You may have missed a story, but if you come up with the accurate story, I think the longevity factor is there. It stays. Because we still have, even though, we're in a fast food generation, and we've been like this for a long time, but in terms of information, we're digesting information at an incredible speed, and the information is being shared at like, even if there is a mistake, that incorrect information has already been shared. So you have to be very, very careful of what you're sharing. With that said, we still have that demo where, you know, that old school, like my mom and dad, who will sit down at 6 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, and they'll watch the news throughout. And so there's the online generation, which I'm very much a part of, and you're in control. The viewer's in control. Yes. You can skip through things. You can kind of click off and on and whatever. And so you're in control as a viewer. With the conventional television viewership, it's very different because they have to, the outlet's in control, the news outlet's in control. And that's a remarkable comparison because of advertising and so forth. But when it comes to information, you know, that's what I don't like when it comes to journalism and media, is that there's no quick race. When you're getting out information that is absolutely impactful, instrumental to such a big demographic, that's a huge responsibility on your hands. And so you have to be responsible and you have to be accurate. So from a producer standpoint, which I've been a producer, I would say make sure all the facts are correct. Yes, you have to be quick and you have to be fast, so you might have to change the dynamic within the newsroom, but you have to also open up your sources. So you have to be very close to the police, you have to be very close to political officials to get that information out and to back it up. So you have to have multiple sources, not just spinning the story and coming up with cute, cheeky headlines, which I would always, you know, again, growing up, I remember, like, you know, how a water bottle can kill you tonight at 6 o'clock. And it was this big dramatic thing. And then we've moved away from that, but that's not now, you know, jumping onto social media. Watch this video, you know, here, well, you'll see X, Y, and Z. And it's just, it's a sensationalism just to get clicks. But in terms of longevity and really building a loyal following, you have to be credible.
And I think as well, from not only just being credible, you need to realize that now with Twitter and Instagram and, you know, posting news, because a lot of journalists now are tweeting news stories while, you know, in the studio it's kind of getting prepped to go on,
exactly.
like, you know, in depth almost. And I find with that, we've almost lost that sort of importance, like you said, that accountability to our crowd, because I'll tweet something, saw this at the murder crime, and then I'm like, okay, I can just delete it later. But it's like, you already spread that information, you know, and where's your credibility as a journalist if you're going to delete it now and say, error, sorry guys, it was actually 40, not, you know, 80 bodies dead. Like, I think you're right in that we're always looking to be fast. We want instant gratification, instant news, instant everything. But we sometimes lose the fact that where's the validity in what we're saying and what information are we actually getting? Because it shapes, I always say the media is so powerful. It is the most powerful way to communicate to people, right? And you're shaping people's views every second that you post something out there on any medium that it is. You're now beginning to shape views, ethnicities, race. So many of our social issues, in fact, are communicated and created by the media.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I even teach, you have to look at the social media verticals differently, rather. So Twitter, it's a perfect feed for journalists. Journalists go to Twitter to get their information. So it's a feed, it's updates, it's what's happening, it's what you're seeing, it's quick time, and you're constantly updating it. Facebook is more storytelling. It's anecdote-based. So you tell a story. It's different from your Twitter posts. And Instagram, rather, is visual. So high-resolution photos. So if you use those mediums differently, your storytelling is different as well. And you're supposed to, you know, based on what they've provided, utilize them differently as well. Now, oftentimes you'll see Twitter's the same, Facebook's the same, and Instagram's the same. And I do it all the time. But that's the one thing is that I find journalists that have the most loyal following are the ones that are the most accurate and credible. And it takes time to get that reputation. I mean, there is that, well, there was that 15 minutes of fame, now it's 15 seconds of fame, right? So that still applies, but how long is your screen time for? And so I think the longevity factor and why, you know, I've been working in the media for 10 plus years, and I started at a very young age, but I think one of the biggest things has always been, even in entertainment, I never followed the gossip mill. Even when we had, you know, one of the interviews was Snoop Dogg, or we had Michael Douglas, or Edward Norton, or any of, you know, Britney Spears, Lady Gaga, whoever you were dealing with at the time, that you would never go into the rumor mill portion of it. You know, if they were having affairs or someone was, you know, cheating on whoever, you wouldn't ask, because to me, it wasn't important to why they were there. And we were talking about the human condition. So if I was reporting something in entertainment, even with my entertainment shows, I had to be 1,000% sure that that was true.
Like the breakup actually happened.
Yeah, that the breakup
happened. It's done.
And ideally, that person may have tweeted something, and so oftentimes where I will get my news sources, it's called social media listening, and you'll start to follow different accounts. Like Kobe Bryant announced his retirement on Twitter.
Yes.
You know, so that was really interesting for sports fans, and so many individuals have spoken out about the use and power of social media. So if you utilize it properly, it's very beneficial. And if you follow different pop cultural icons to singers and musicians and actors, you can just go to their account and verify it, as opposed to just listening to everyone else. And it's a great source. I just go straight to the source.
And now that they have PR people for them, you can actually kind of get the information from them, how much they want to share and what's actually true, right?
Yeah.
Leading up to my next question, on the other side of the break, we are going to talk about the future of TV and where Veronica sees it is going in the world of social media. Stay tuned, everybody. I'm Rishika Binra on #NoFilter. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is already our last episode, last segment to the episode end of #NoFilter. It's been great sitting down with Veronica, so thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Really, really quick, we're going to take one last tweet, so let's see what people are asking. Cassandra says, where do you see the world of media heading in the next 10 years? Veronica, pretty much leading into what I wanted to ask you. With TV specifically as well, I kind of want to know where you see it going, because I remember when television came, everyone said it's the death of radio. That's it. Now people are like, no, this time it's really, TV is dead in the next 10 years, especially in Western media. A lot of people say North America and Europe, TV will die, social media will be the only form. And then a lot of people say back home, places like India, more of sort of the Middle East areas as well, because they're so, about soap operas and storytelling and visual, TV's not going to die for another 10, 20 years. It's going to catch up slower. So just as someone sort of who's, hands wet in this industry, we kind of want your fortune foreseeing.
Well, there was a lot more money in television when I first started, and we had a lot of travel expenses paid for, and we got to travel the world, and we got to do, we had a lot of opportunity to create great ideas and shows, and there's still that opportunity. The platform's just changing. I think, I truly believe that the business model has to change.
Okay.
I think that, when I came into television, the term wasn't social media, it was multimedia, and no one knew what that meant. And then social media came into play. And one of the things that we need to be able to do is integrate the two, because there is a demo for television appetites. And what we need to do is marry the television content with the online content. And what I mean by that is we have to make it quicker. So the magic number right now for videos at the moment, unless it's probably changed in the last little bit, is 1:29. That is actually the digestible video time for anyone to watch content, and after that they tune out. Now, everyone is at that, so I don't want to say everybody,
overall,
but that's the magic number. Yeah, overall. So for video, with respect to media, I don't personally think television is going to fully be obsolete. I think we're going to change the model. I think social media, now look at it this way, and I'm just going to throw it out there. Social media is great. We see the content creators, but the content creators often get, verified, or they're legitimate or credible when they get back onto conventional TV, and they have press clippings, and they're part of certain, shows and so forth. So it's this interesting.
They have a media kit now that they can show. Right?
So now, on one hand, you could say the social media platforms are the training ground, while other people will say that's where you've made it and you have full authority over your content, and it's the opposite for conventional television. So it's a very interesting conversation. I do think it's evolving. I do think women are going to be a huge part of that conversation, and we're going to have a lot more power, which is wonderful. And I also feel like we're going to figure out a way, and maybe you know, the millennials for sure are the ones who are going to come up with this idea that we haven't even stumbled upon. The only thing I think the downfall will be is that I think the media outlets and the news outlets will be controlled by a handful of groups, perhaps even within, you know, you can name them on one hand type of thing. And that's something I don't like from a journalistic standpoint, and especially in democracies. So, you know, hopefully that doesn't happen, because once control gets in, it's obviously supplied by sponsorships, advertisements.
Lose the freedom.
And exactly.
There's a lot of bias in that.
100%, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I hope for your sake, my sake, and for all of us, because we're all TV lovers, that's kind of, you know, we can kind of have both of the industries working in parallel together, because I totally agree. Each one needs the other. Yeah. And you can't have a great film in the theater without a good promotion on TV and without it having it online. Like, I'm such a firm believer that everything works together. Yeah. So that's the good side. Yeah. So
and there's people who want good stories.
Yes.
You know, and we're constantly in need of stories. And that goes back to centuries ago, decades ago. That's not going anywhere. The platform may change, but
and authentic stories. Yeah. I think that's, you know, something that's really important today. We have a minute left to our show wrap. What I want to ask you is, where do you see your future? As somebody who's been, you know, at some of the most successful shows, you've interviewed some great people behind the scenes and front, you have your teaching cap on, you know, where do you see yourself in your next journey in the media world?
Well, I love teaching. I feel very at home teaching, being a professor. The studio was always my classroom when I was on air, and I loved it. I think I will be an educator for life. I want to teach for a very long time. I feel very empowered, especially teaching females. You know, and there's so many great guys in my classes as well. Incredibly gifted people and talented people and inspired individuals. But yeah, I really want to be teaching. I want to utilize my platforms to speak about anti-human trafficking initiatives and humanitarian causes. I always believe that if you have a platform, speak out, do good for no reason, really and truly, or create awareness. And then I want to help individuals get into the industry, because I really have a strong belief that journalism is certainly not going anywhere, and neither is the media industry.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Veronica. It has been an absolute pleasure to sit down with somebody like that, a great inspiration for millennials entering the media industry. So we will see you next week on #NoFilter. I'm Ruchika Bindra signing off. Thanks, everybody.